Morning, everyone. We know you're there in the background. We're just giving you a minute or two for a few more attendees to hopefully log on, and we'll be with you and get started very shortly. So just bear with us for another minute or so. I'll just literally give it another minute. Thank you for those of you who've been prompt to see if we have any more attendees, and then we'll get started. Right. Okay. Well, I think we're gonna get things started now. I'm sure there'll be some others joining us hopefully along the way. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first webinar under the Hammersmith and Fulham Ready to Supply program. It's a great program, even if I say so myself, and there'll be a lot of support and help available to businesses, particularly in the borough of Hammersmith and Fulham, if you want to win larger contracts and bid for larger tender that are available from both the public sector and the private sector. So some usual ground rules to start with. You probably know this from having attended many webinars, but cameras off, mute yourselves for now. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat, although I will make some time, hopefully at the end, for some chat as well and some questions. So I'm just going to get on to a screen share, first technology challenge. So just bear with me a second. Right, I'm hoping you can see that. If you can't see that, could someone unmute themselves and tell me? But I'm assuming that you hopefully can. So let's get moving. Okay, so just a little bit about myself to start with. My background is banking for my sins, 30 years of it. One of the good guys, obviously, I would say that. But on a serious note, part of my career involved a lot of tendering and bidding. When I was part of, well, actually, when I headed the government team for Lloyds, we were involved in submitting tenders, renewals, new tender contracts for local authorities and central government departments. I've been a member of the Hounslow Fit to Bid programme, which has also run last year, again helping SMEs to get better at tendering and bidding for larger contracts. And I think I've probably done the best part of 100 one-to-ones in the last 18 months or so, so a reasonable amount of experience. And as it says, I'm a member of the Branduin team, and I've also got a small social care business that I run myself in Harrow, where I am located. So just a tiny bit about Branduin and who we are. We're running the programme on behalf of Hammersmith and Fulham. As it says, we're a leading group of business advisors and specialists. The thing that is unique about us, we think, is that we all have actual experience of running businesses and various different specialisms. The way we operate is we operate typically through chambers of commerce, through local authorities, running programs like these to support all types of businesses, right from startup through to more established organisations. As it says, we work with chambers of commerce, their members, a number of different business growth specialists, and the programs we run are quite sort of bespoke. The Fit to Bid program and the Ready to Supply is what we're doing here today. And we've also run, as you can see at the bottom right of the slide, some more specialist programs. The peer network program was one we've been running in the Hertfordshire area for the last 18 months, bringing specialists, bringing companies together to share ideas and get support and challenge. So a variety of different experiences. In terms of what we're going to cover in the program this morning and in our second session, we'll talk about how you can better engage with procurement departments, which is key. There's also an online bid assessment and questionnaire, which if you haven't completed, it takes literally less than 5 minutes. I would encourage you to do, because it gives us a better idea of your state of preparedness for tendering and bidding. Will help you in terms of improving your bidding skills, and this is part of that program. And the bidding process is very much a sales process, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. And additionally, if you're based in the borough of Hammersmith and Fulham, you'll also get specialist one-to-one advice from advisors like myself, and there are 2 sessions per company. So you probably can't see that launch because it's behind the screen, but let's get ready to launch. That's what that was all about. So as I said, there are a number of benefits in this program, and I genuinely believe that. So I won't read all these out, but essentially we will help you assess your bid writing skills, and we'll share best practice. We'll share tips and ideas that we've seen along the way when dealing with companies and the experience that I've had when I've been involved in tendering. As I said, you'll have access, if you're based in the borough of Hammersmith and Fulham, to 2 specialist one-to-one advice sessions, and I'll talk more about that also in a minute. We'll help you get to a point where you can submit an expression of interest. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of what that is, but essentially it shows that you have an interest in bidding for contracts, and we'll give you support in actually the writing and submitting bids that are more likely to win. You may have come across the business model canvas. If you haven't, it's a model that helps businesses assess their strengths, both internally and externally, and will help you prepare something that is particularly tailored for tendering. And we'll also talk to you about what is your value proposition and help you establish that so you can bid more effectively, particularly when you're dealing with procurement departments. And these sessions aren't one-off and then we say goodbye. There is continuing engagement throughout the program, and there'll be regular and ongoing feedback. So I think there's a lot of support there available if you're wanting to improve your bidding and tendering skills. So, first question for you. Some of you will recognise that. That's the civic campus development down, I think, on King Street. I'm not familiar as you are with the area, but the question is, would you bid for something like that? Would you bid to be involved with that type of contract? And the point I'm trying to make there is, there's no reason why you shouldn't, as long as you've got the right processes, the right systems, and you know what's required to bid for these larger contracts, because sometimes it can be quite off-putting as a smaller business. And there are a huge number of opportunities, both in the borough of Hammersmith and Fulham from the council and from private sector companies in the area. So if we can get you to a point where you're comfortable and you have some systems and processes in place, then hopefully you'll be more confident in bidding for these larger contracts, which can be quite lucrative, can be longer term, and make a real difference to you and your business. So what are we going to cover today and in the second session, which is in 3 weeks' time? The key thing to talk to you about here is it is an interactive session. I'm sure you've all, like me, sat through plenty of webinars during lockdown where you've listened to someone talking and you've gone away with best intentions to do something, but actually you get back to your day job and guess what? Life takes over and nothing happens. So this is an interactive session, give you a chance to do some exercises, and I really would encourage you all to commit to one action that you will take forward in your bidding process from this webinar so that something tangible happens. And I might ask you what that might be at the end. As it says, we're going to share the principles of best practice, and the bidding process is very much a selling process. It is not, as some companies think, an administrative task. If you treat it as an administrative form-filling exercise, you're more likely to be on the way to submitting a losing bid, and we don't want that to happen. So it is an exercise in selling. These are some of the objectives across the 2 sessions that I'll be running. We'll look at how to help you produce winning bids. We'll look at why organisations go out to tender, what sort of things they look for. We'll talk about the basics, because if you don't get the basic fundamentals right, you will quite likely be removed from the process. You will not make even the first cut. So that's, while simple, it's important. We'll look at the things that make up a winning bid, supported by what I like to call the golden rules. And I'll elaborate that more in a minute. We'll look at questioning, how you understand the questions, what are the objectives of the client, how you articulate your solution and its benefits and selling points. That's particularly important. We'll look about how you provide and where you provide evidence, what sort of research you need to do. And that will hopefully all help you to write a more bespoke, accurate, and articulate bid, which is easier for the client to understand and assess. But there's quite a lot to get through in the next hour and in the following session. So I'm going to keep going. As I said, if there's any questions, pop them in the chat. And for the starters, it will be helpful to get a little bit of an idea of your bidding experience. So as you can see there, there's 3 criteria. Have you never just tendered before? Perhaps you completed 1 or 2 tenders, or you regularly submit bids and tenders. So if you could just put something in the chat now, just a 1, 2, or a 3, and if you are a 2 or 3, what's been your level of success? You know, have you had some good responses? Have you won tenders or not? So I'm going to give you 30 seconds just to put that into the chat now. So please do that. It's quite straightforward. Okay, that's good. So a couple of people have had, oh yeah, fantastic. So some people have submitted quite a lot of tenders and had success. So this is excellent. Okay, just 10 seconds more if you haven't put anything in the chat, but it seems like people have experience of submitting tenders, so that's really great. Okay, that's helpful to start with, just give you an idea of where your level of experience is. I'm just trying to change my slide and it's not changing, so there's the first technology challenge. Let me just see why that's happening. Give me a second. Just bear with me 2 seconds. The joys of technology. Excellent. The system works. Okay, so second exercise I want you to think about is, why do organisations go out to tender? Because it takes a lot of time and effort for everyone involved on all sides, particularly the client. So why would you put yourself through that process? What do clients look for in a provider? And one of the key things which is useful for you to try to do is put yourself in the mind of the buyer, because if you can write your bid from the buyer's perspective, you'll be putting yourself in a much stronger position. So next exercise, just for a minute or so, is just pop some stuff into chat as to why do you think organisations go out to tender and what sort of things are they looking for. So I'll give you a minute to do that. Don't worry, I'm going to do quite a lot of work as well, but you've got a little bit to do to start with to give me an idea of where you are in the tendering process. So I'll just give you a moment for that. Any ideas from anyone? I see people are putting in their success level, which is good. Yeah, looking for competitive rates, absolutely right, that's for sure. Yeah, to set yourself up as a go-to company, fantastic. Yeah, lots of good stuff there. Yeah, achieve value for money. Yeah, and for legal requirements. Absolutely correct. So lots of good reasons there. So you've also got a good understanding. So what I'll do now is I'll share some of the things that we see from my perspective. This is rather frustrating. Every time I go to chat, for some reason, it seems to stop the screen share. So give me Give me a moment. I'm not sure why that's happening. Lisa or Nowser, if you're there in the background and you're able to help me on that, that's fine. But
I would suggest, Anashir, leave the chat to me.
okay, thank you.
Unless there's, and I would recommend to all attendees, if they've got a question to ask, then put it into Q&A, but continue with your presentation. It might just be a question of your mouse as well, using your mouse accordingly, or your keyboard.
All right, thanks. So I'll leave you to manage the chat now. So thanks for that. Okay, so these are some of the reasons that companies do go out to tender, and you've covered some of them in the chat. So it's to enable an objective comparison, particularly with public sectors, particularly with local authorities. They'll be asking the same questions to all suppliers, and certain companies, particularly the public sector, they need to go out to tender if the contract is over a certain size. They have to do that, not necessarily the private sector. It helps to minimize risk in terms of their supplier selection, because they're allowing everyone to operate on a level playing field. People talked about, going out for legal reasons. Absolutely right. Compliance with legislation, local policies, terms and conditions, that sort of thing. Some companies, some SMEs think that the lowest price wins tenders. And let me tell you now, that's not true. It's very much about achieving a competitive price that is sustainable and provides value for money and delivers a return on investment. And it's all about what they're getting for their money, and they'll look at that as part of the evaluation process. How is it making their process more efficient? Is it saving them time? Is it saving them effort? Is it taking a process out of a system which makes it more efficient? So there are many, many ways that companies will go out, or reasons they'll go out for tender, and preferably with these efficiencies, if they can be measured, so much more the better. And what other factors can you consider that companies might go out to tender for? They'll be looking for suppliers who have an innovative mindset, who can get into their mindset and help them with what they're trying to achieve. And this feedback here, just so you know, all comes from actual real tenders and contract evaluators. So it's actual information that we found over time. They want to know how you will actually carry out the work. What's your level of competence? How will you deliver the service? As I said, how will you improve their process? What sort of way do you communicate? Do you operate in a collaborative manner? Another thing that's actually quite useful that a lot of companies will look for is a cultural fit. Do you fit in with their sort of values and behaviors? Do you have similar values? Do you have a similar thought process? They'll be looking for companies who can provide them with useful, usable management information, hugely important, and how it can help their organization. What's your future-focused expertise? And what I mean by that is, what's the big picture for the company? What's their strategy now and in the medium to long term? Are you transparent and open about communication? Will you take accountability when things go wrong? Because things do go wrong, we know that. And a lot of times when things go wrong, it's about how you sort it out going forward, which can make a massive difference. Do you have a problem-solving ethic? Do you look for ways to find and improve systems and processes? And often, you'll be dealing with the evaluator, so not necessarily the end service user within the local authority or within the company. So the evaluators, they'll be looking to try and ensure that they're satisfying their internal end user customers. So there are a number of reasons which and why companies will go out to tender. And if you understand these and are able to demonstrate how you can meet those requirements, then you're going to be putting yourself in a stronger position to submit a winning bid. So I talked about the basics, and it's critically important to get this information right, because if you don't, you won't make even the initial first cut. So there'll typically be what's known as a supplier questionnaire, and it will just have information about your company. You may see it as a tick box exercise, but you've got to make sure you tick every box and complete every section. In the public sector particularly, there may be what's called a form of tender, and that's just something which asks you to sign and return an acknowledgement to say you've read all the terms and agree with all the terms and conditions. It could be a non-collusion certificate, again, more in the public sector, to say that you've come to your bid independently. You may hear all sorts of different terminology. You might hear things like ITT, invitation to tender, RFI, request for proposal, request for proposal, request for information, pre-qualification questionnaire. There's lots of terminology, but we'll talk mainly about bids and proposals in this. The customer will typically ask for you to provide some financial information, often 3 years accounts. They'll ask you for references, typically 2 to 3 references. And if you can provide references where you provided similar services that are being requested, then that's going to put you in a stronger position. This again may be stating the obvious, but make sure you tell the referees that you're putting down on the information that you provided them with a reference, and therefore they're expecting contact from the local authority or from the organisation. You may need to demonstrate that you've got certain policies in place, a contingency plan, health and safety, social value policies. That's becoming very important. So if you can have these policies established within your company up front, it'll save you a lot of time and effort when you're bidding for tenders. And there'll typically always be a pricing template to complete. And the last bit I'm putting in bold, which again, it's critically important because I've certainly fallen foul of it, is plan this very carefully, plan your response carefully and allow sufficient time. But all your competitors will be doing this. So it's literally the baseline starting point. It's not enough for you to win your bid. So let's get on to the real writing. Talk briefly about planning, and plan your response as a project. You don't have to overcomplicate things, but use a simple Excel spreadsheet. Put in place some timelines, put in place some goals and milestones in terms of what you need to achieve by what timeline and who's responsible to do it. Might sound obvious, but the better you plan, the more likely you're going to meet the deadlines and produce a winning bid. Who's on your bidding team? Who can help you within your organisation? Do people have experience of doing those sort of things? So talk about and investigate within your own companies. Who are the internal and external stakeholders that you're looking to satisfy? And the penultimate bullet point, I think, is another key one. Make sure you're crystal clear on the deadlines, because certainly, and I know from my experience with local authorities, if your response comes in 5 minutes, 10 minutes after the deadline, you will not be included, you'll be rejected from the process. So you need to be crystal clear on what those deadlines are. And a simple thing that I always used to do is work to a day before. So if the deadline is the 24th, at the end of March, for example, make sure you're working to the 30th of March. And the final point is, when you're involved in a bid or a tender response, like in my days when I was responding to tenders and bids, they were quite complex. They could often run to 50 to 60 pages. And if you've been working on that for a few weeks, you become so engrossed, you don't see the obvious sometimes. So make sure someone other than the person who's responsible for writing the tender response proofreads it before it's sent out. And that'll all help you get yourself in a better position to write winning bids. So what are the principal elements of a winning bid? Well, you have to have the right price. And as I said earlier, not necessarily the cheapest price, but the right price. So you need to know your market. You need to know your competition. You need to understand it and be able to know what is the right price. You need to directly answer the questions according to the evaluation criteria. That sounds obvious, but again, we'll do an exercise on this after, because being crystal clear on ensuring that you cover all elements of a question to make the evaluator's life easier is critical. How do you demonstrate an understanding of the broader needs and objectives of the client? Can you demonstrate that you've got a credible, competent solution to the issue that the company is trying to resolve and that they're tendering for? And this is critical. Often companies bidding talk about their own company. They talk about features. They talk about how good they are at doing certain things. But you need to confirm what the benefits are for the clients. I know this sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many times it doesn't happen. You need to explain and articulate clearly to the company how your solution is going to help them, whether it's cost savings, whether it's time saving, it's efficiencies. So be clear on the benefits. Again, put yourself in the mind of the company. And how can you evidence this? How can you support what you're saying with facts? Because everyone will be saying these things, but can you evidence that you've either done this before or you've got case studies? How are you going to do that? We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And finally, when evaluators are reviewing bid and tender responses, they've got a lot of information to review. So what we want to be doing is writing in a way that is clear, precise, and lean. And what I mean by that is it's not too wordy. It gives them all the information they need, but it gives it to them in a way that helps them evaluate it quickly. And what we're going to do today is cover the top two elements, and then we'll cover the rest in the second session. So I talked about golden rules, and basically the golden rules, as I call them, they apply to all businesses, regardless of sector, regardless of business type. So if you follow these fundamental principles, you'll put yourself in a much stronger position to submit winning bids. So typically, excellent bids will usually win contracts. You probably know where the next slide in box is going. Poor bids will typically or usually lose contracts. So again, sounds obvious, but it is very true. If you do submit a bid that is well considered, well thought out, solutions that meet the requirements, benefits articulated, evidence, you're going to be putting yourself in a much stronger position. So as I said, excellent bids win, poor bids lose. But you'll be surprised how many bid responses are poorly prepared and written. And some of the issues I've listed below. Providing incomplete answers or not understanding the question. Again, we'll do an exercise on this in a moment because it sounds obvious, but what the evaluator will do is they will look at their question, they'll read their question, and then they'll read the response from the supplier and see to what extent it has been answered. Again, I talked earlier about focusing on your business and not on the customer. So telling the client how good you are at X, Y, Z, but not articulating the benefits. So describing features, what it is, as opposed to the benefits, how it can help the client. It's much more important to demonstrate how you can improve the process, how you can save time, how you can reduce costs. And if you can measure that, so much the better. And the final one is, as I said, a lack of hard evidence to back up what you're saying, because all your competition will be doing that. And we'll talk about evidence more in the second session. So quite a lot of information there. So the fundamental question when you're looking to submit a bid and you're about to write a winning bid is, why us? So why should the company choose you as a supplier over and above your competitors? What's your plan for a great winning bid? So again, it's a fundamental key question. So I'm going to give you a minute just to pop something in the chat as to why you think you should be chosen over and above your competitors, and then I'll run through some examples for you. So I'll just give you 30 seconds or so to pop something in the chat, and Mauzo, you'll kindly keep an eye on it for me. So think about what differentiates you, what makes you stand out from the competition. Okay, so let me give you some examples. You may have got some of these in the chat already. Ah, we've done that, so that's great. So let me give you the examples. These are some of the reasons why a company might choose you. Think about how well you know the client. Do you have a relationship with them already? Do you have contact with them? How can you evidence what you're saying? Do you have a bank of case studies, testimonials, strong references? Do you have some Google reviews saying what you've done? Where can they find this evidence? Is it easy for the company to access? Can you demonstrate that you've got expertise and knowledge and experience within the sector? How are you going to do this? Have you worked in the sector before? If you can demonstrate this, you're going to be putting yourself in a much stronger position to your competitors. So as it says, have you worked on similar contracts? And can you demonstrate, can you show measurably, tangibly how you added value? And what's the knowledge and experience of your team? What's the size? What's your level of resource? What's the background of the people who will be involved in the process? What's your track record? And is this enough? Is this enough to ensure you submit a winning bid? Well, it's a good start, but not really, because everything you're saying, if it's generic, will also be claimed by your competitors. So what you need to do is you need to turn that generic language into more focused, value-driven explanations with evidence to score the highest marks with the evaluators. Because everyone will say they're flexible, they provide a great service, they've got, evidence of case studies, but how do you differentiate yourself over and above your competition? So as I said, one of the golden rules is understanding clearly what you're being asked. The objectives are critical to writing a winning answer. And I keep talking about putting yourself in the mind of the buyer. And because if you can do that, you're going to be well on the way to understanding what's really important to them, not to you, and submitting a winning bid. And there's a hierarchy, I suppose, in terms of the objectives that all companies will have when they're going out to tender. And again, it's all about understanding these and identifying them. So there'll be some organizational objectives and drivers. And these are the high-level strategic issues that the project must meet to satisfy the internal requirements. There'll be some absolute needs of the project which have to be met, perhaps with what we call some sub-needs, which are essentially additional needs that might be needed within the company. And then there's the added value stuff. This is important because it's an opportunity for you as a supplier to demonstrate your knowledge, make recommendations, differentiate yourself from your competition. One great question that I was asked by a client when I'd submitted a tender, we've been asked to present, and essentially the question was, what is it that we have not thought about? That's what the client asked us. And that's an excellent question, because that allows you to demonstrate over and above what they've put in their tender request, how you can add additional value. And if you can identify these objectives at the different levels, you'll be on the way to submitting a winning bid. So where can you find this information to help you with completing a winning bid? Well, first of all, they tell us. They tell us in the invitation to tender. So read all the specification, read the pack of information very carefully. There may be a PQQ, a pre-qualification questionnaire, which will also give you information. You can ask questions and they'll give you answers. You probably need to do that remotely at the moment, or certainly in the last 18 months due to COVID. So it's harder to engage directly with clients, but certainly have some form of dialogue with the supplier. Build relationships, because your competitors will be doing this. Get to know the client, understand what are their objectives, what are their needs. And you can always ask and clarify requirements of the client through the formal question and answer process. But just be careful when you do that, because the responses will always be shared with everyone. So don't ask anything that's sensitive, and make sure you read all the responses from the client before you ask a question, so you don't ask a question it's already been asked by another potential supplier, because that will show you to be, I guess, unprofessional, a lack of attention to detail. So, you know, there are a number of ways that you, as a supplier, can get to understand more critically what it is the company are looking to achieve as part of that tender process. So how do you maximize your score? Because evaluators will be looking at responses from everyone on the same basis. So the first thing, as I said, is correctly identifying all the different elements of a question. Making sure you understand all the different bits will help you structure your answer more completely and more effectively, and that will then ensure you're being scored more highly. Because if you only complete part of a response to a question, it's obvious that you will not be scoring as highly, and you'll be getting marked more low, and consequently you'll be taken out. You know, you may not make the cut in terms of the shortlist. So here's a little question, and this is a real question from a real bed in terms of looking at the detail of a question. So have a quick read of that. I could read it, but I think you're all capable of reading. How many elements must our answer address to this question within the tender? I'll literally give you sort of 30 seconds to whiz it through. You don't have to go into massive detail in terms of reading, just skim it over. So there are 3 bullet points, there are 3 paragraphs. So typically you'd think, well, there are 3 parts to the question, right? That would be your first thought. But actually, if we break it down a little bit further and look at what's being asked, you can see that there are actually 6 specific requirements within this question. So in the first paragraph, it talks about a high-level description of the structure of the company. It talks about the structure of the division, the part of the company that's responsible for delivering the services, the number of people in each team, what are the resources expected to deliver the proposed solution. So if you look a little bit more deeply, you see that actually there are 6 elements to this question. And let's look at section 3, question 3, or section element 3 as an example. It says, what are the number of people in each team? Well, the answer might be 5. So you could put 5. But actually, you could elaborate a little bit more. You might put, for example, an appendice with the brief details of what the experience and knowledge of your team are. There might be additional resources behind that team, which will help support your bid. So try again, step back, think carefully why the company is asking the question. And if you do that, again, put yourself in the mind of the buyer, you're more likely to complete a response that is over and above what's expected and score more effectively. So this is just basically an evaluation criteria example. There's no standard evaluation method or process, but quite simply, you want to be scoring 4 or preferably 5. So if you produce no answer, or you produce an incomplete answer without evidence, let me just see if I can move this so people can see it. So yeah, if you see that 0 score there, you either haven't responded, or your answer doesn't even meet the basic requirements. You will score poorly. You will score potentially nothing. And there's a sliding scale, I guess, moving up to 5, which is what we should all be aspiring to do, which is providing a well-defined solution, linked and articulated with clear benefits and backed up by strong evidence. And also, you show and can demonstrate where you'll add value, how you'll add value, and it's measurable. Sometimes in tenders, what you'll find is there's a weighting in terms of different parts of the tender response. So, for example, pricing might be weighted at 60%, and service might be 40%. That often happens in tender responses. So look at that also very carefully to ensure that if there's a stronger weighting in a particular area, you give that particular attention, because that's going to be scoring you more highly, particularly where you provide good, strong responses. So, next exercise about researching. Very important to get to know the client. As I said, there's information that's provided to you, but there's a whole host of additional information that you can find yourself with a bit of effort. So, again, a minute for you to just write down what information you need and where you might be able to get this from. So again, just please put something into the chat. I'm forcing or encouraging you to think, because as I said, by actually doing something rather than just listening to me tell you about all this hopefully useful information, you're more likely to remember it, it's more likely to stick in your mind, it's more likely to help you when you're looking at completing a tender bid response. I'll give you 30 seconds to write something in the chat. You'll just get the base level information in the tender information pack. And your challenge is to find out more. The more you know, the better. Okay, I'm conscious of time, so I'll share some ideas with you. The first place to start, which is very good, of course, is the company's website. This is the website we have for ourselves, Branduin. You can spot my cheesy smiling grin without the beard. And what it does is, the website, it tells you a bit about the company, the individuals, what they think of what's happening in their area, their sector, a bit about themselves. It's a good starting point in terms of understanding more about the client. You could go to their LinkedIn page. Again, there may be a group page for the company. You can have links to individual page, and all this starts to help you get a better idea and understanding of what's important to the company. What sort of things are they talking about? What are the issues within their sector, within their industry at the moment? And then, of course, there's a whole host of social media platforms, as we know, where you can find out information. So there's lots and lots of sources in different places that you can find more detailed information about the client. Let me give you an example. This screenshot here is basically taken from the Hammersmith and Fulham website, and there's lots and lots of really helpful information. So it talks about, if you want to trade with the council, where can you find tender opportunities? What sort of policies they want you to have in place? It provides you things like contact details, contact numbers. And again, it allows you to sort of investigate and understand what's important to them, what they're proud of, what can you take from that research and mention, discuss, acknowledge, or comment upon within your tender. Because it all helps you to differentiate from your competition by showing you've done that research and you're getting underneath and really understanding the company and what's important to them. There's lots and lots of information out there with the council and with private sector companies as well. I mean, obviously in Hammersmith, you've got the council, you've got a couple of large football clubs, Chelsea and Fulham, neither of which are my team, so I won't comment. Hospitals, Imperial University, there are lots and lots of opportunities for local suppliers. And certainly in the last 18 months with COVID, larger tier 1, tier 2 organizations have recognized that there's value, there's benefit in having a local supply chain. So particularly with the council, they want to encourage local supply chains. So do your research. You know, as I said, it even talks about how they evaluate contracts, you know, what they spend on different contracts. There's lots and lots of information out there. Do you have contacts within the organization? Do your colleagues know people within the organization? Who's doing the buying? Who are the influencers? Who are the decision makers within the organization that is tendering? So there's a lot of useful information available, and you need to go and find it. And there's some more information there. There is literally a whole host of useful stuff, and there's even a contact name of the head of contracts and procurement, so you can start to build relationships. And the council want that to happen, and I'm sure private sector companies similarly would encourage that proactive approach in terms of getting to know the client. So what are the other sources of information? Let me just move that down slightly. Well, first of all, there's obviously the bid document, and that drives and leads our thinking because it's the base document. You've got internal resources and knowledge. You may have colleagues who know the company, partners who know the company. Possibly you might have sent a previous bid into the organization. If you did, what sort of feedback did you get? This information is powerful. There's information in their annual report and accounts that you can use. There are various Google sites such as Glassdoor. Glassdoor, if you haven't heard of it, it just allows staff to give their view on the company they're working for. And that all helps. You know, you can set up Google alerts. So if you want information about a certain topic, a certain subject, you just put that into Google alerts. And every morning you'll get a feed into your inbox, which basically tells you what's going on in that area. You can hopefully start to attend a few events and conferences post-COVID. You might actually be allowed to do that again now, which would be nice. And you know, there are a lot of other sources of information from government papers, credit reference agencies, competitor websites. That's also a good area to sort of understand what's going on with these companies. So there is really a lot of information out there. And credit reference agencies are particularly good for the private sector because they'll provide and they'll produce detailed analysis of different companies. So there really are a lot of sources out there for you to tap into. And what information do you need? What should we be looking for? Well, certainly understanding their strategic position, short-term, medium-term, and long-term. What's important to them now? What's their current thinking? You know, what's happening in their world? It just all shows an interest in where the company is going. What are their visions and values? What do they have views and opinions upon? What's important to them at the moment? So, for example, when I'm talking to a lot of companies at the moment, smaller businesses, working from home is a big issue because where's the balance between, you know, providing flexibility for staff to work at home versus getting people back in the office to ensure there's morale, there's good team building, there's lots of sharing of ideas. There are always key issues within an organization. What are their current challenges? What are their goals? What's going on in their market? What are the business critical issues for them? And also, when you read all this information, you can get a flavor and a feel for the sort of language they use. And it's a really good thing to understand this and reflect that sort of terminology within your own tender response, because people will, you know, companies will relate to that more effectively if you're using similar language. They may even have a definition of what's a good supplier for them. You know, certainly the council have that. You could ask them, you know, what's your definition of a strong supplier, and they will tell you. They will tell you exactly the sort of things they need. Who are the key people within the organisation? You know, has a senior executive stood up and said something recently, which you could sort of reflect back? What are their personal drivers and motivations? There's a whole host of useful information that you can find out. So, for example, with the council, you can find out that I think 3 of their largest sectors which they buy for, the care sector, the building construction sector, and they need a lot of agency staff. You can find out all this information. You can find out what sort of contracts are coming up for tender, and that'll put you in a better position to be ready to tender and submit winning bids. So the more you know about your prospects and your clients in advance, the better, the more professional you'll appear, the more knowledgeable you'll appear. So do spend the time and effort to do that. It is important. Right, well, we're coming to the end and just about on time, thankfully, so that's always good. I'm going to hand over to Nauza now briefly, if you're there, because as I said earlier, there are a whole host of benefits in terms of the Ready to Supply program, and these are just some of those additional events and support activities that we'll be putting on. So Nauza, I think you know the form. You seem to have unmuted yourself, so over to you, and I'll rest my voice for a moment.
Okay, thank you, Naushir. I'll hand it back to you in a few minutes. But having said that, okay, thank you all for attending. We've got a great range of sessions which will help you. So what makes us different and what makes you different as well is that we look at your business model first. Then we ask you, are you ready? Are you ready to tender? So have you got the products and services for procurement? You might be selling online. You might have a retail shop. You might be doing direct customer sales. but are your products and services ready for procurement? So we evaluate that. That's a session using a canvas as well. Then we look at how do you create a bid, and in a structured sort of a format where we have a project management expert, very simple sort of a process, but a structured sort of a process to make sure that your bid submission meets the time and the resource requirements you need to make it a successful one. The next one is marketing to tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. How do you use LinkedIn? This is all about LinkedIn. How do you use LinkedIn to create relationships with local authorities, large buyers, anybody that you want to sell to, you want to send a proposal? Absolutely invaluable, a very successful workshop, which we urge you to attend. Then you'll have to bear with me. It's a great sort of a passion of mine, the circular economy. If you want to work with local authorities and larger organizations, achieve green certifications, net zero, and look at the impact of climate change on your business, however small it may be, the requirements from local authorities and large businesses are all heading in that sort of a direction. So this workshop will look at the circular economy, and we believe that you cannot participate in the circular economy on your own. You've got to partner, you've got to collaborate. So this is a great session. And then followed up by writing public sector bids and tenders, where Naushad and I will do a joint sort of a presentation, taking you through the full details of a real tender opportunity, and helping you to look at what things like method statements are, what resource application, how do you plan your pricing, etc. At the end of this, we plan in June. The timing could be changed. It could be 10 a.m. or it could be in the afternoon, or it could be an evening sort of a session. But this is a live face-to-face session where we plan to get senior people from the local authority, senior and key buyers from the private sector to come and join us and give you an opportunity to talk to them, directly. Hopefully by then you'll have attended a few of the webinars. Hopefully by then you'll have done the one-to-one sessions with Naushad and the team and be in a strong position to present your products and services to a panel. So hope that makes sense. We look forward to you. The links will be sent to you. The links are being updated. Links will be sent to you as we said by next week. And this webinar will be up on the Chamber YouTube channel within a couple of days. So we look forward to your active. This is a practical sort of program. This is not just a skills, a building one. We will connect you to live events, to live tender opportunities. We are in constant discussion with the council. We had a meeting with them just yesterday. The next few sessions, we will be dedicating about 10 minutes at each of these key sessions on live opportunities. So the council are going to give us a list, which will be made available to you, the list of sessions for the next, the list of tenders for the next 8 to 9 months. So we look forward to seeing you on these webinars. And over to you, Naushad.
Great stuff. Thanks for that, Nauza. So yeah, just to re-emphasize what Nauza said, there is a lot of support there. There's a lot of sort of useful information that we believe will make a big difference to you, not only in terms of tendering and bidding, but in the wider context of your business and marketing as well. So, please do attend where you can. So just to finish off, I wanted to touch upon the one-to-one sessions. As I said, we've got a number of companies, hopefully 80 or more companies coming through the program. And if you're based in Hammersmith and Fulham area as a company, you'll have access to 2 one-hour sessions with a specialist advisor. And as I said at the outset, all the advisors have technical knowledge, as you'd expect, but they've also run their own companies. So they've been through some of the challenges that you'd be going through, both in terms of bidding and tendering and perhaps some wider issues. So they're very focused sessions, and they're all documented within an action card, because the whole idea behind these sessions is that within the first session, there's a bit of an analysis of you, your company, your challenges around how you submit bids, tenders, and then from those sessions, actions come out, which you work on in between, and then we help you with support in the second session. So as it says down on the sort of participation action plan, it will talk to you about how to bid for new business. It'll basically help you understand what the procurement process is, access to the relevant portals where tender opportunities are advertised. We'll help you with a sort of tender submission project plan. We'll look at your value proposition and do that as part of the business model canvas process. And also make sure that you've got the basics in place, as I said earlier in the presentation, to ensure you've got the right policies, and it puts you in the sort of the shortlist cut to start with. So it'll help you get your tendering and bidding situation in a better state of preparedness, because it does take a bit of time and effort initially. I mean, people who've submitted bids regularly, I'm sure they would sort of say that when you do your first one, it's probably the one where you have to commit the most time and effort. You've got to get those policies in place. Sometimes the process structure and procedure is new to you, so it takes a little bit of time. But if you follow the fundamental guiding principles, those golden rules, and the things we've talked about this morning, it becomes easier and your likelihood of success becomes significantly greater. So it's just about 11 o'clock, so I think we're about to end. This is the first part of a two-part bidding skills webinar sessions. So I'll be doing a second advanced session in 3 weeks' time. I hope to see you all and a few more people there. I did talk to you at the outset about committing to some sort of action, one action that you're going to do to help you move your business forward. So if you wish, please do put something into the chat as to what you'll be doing. And additionally, we've probably got a few minutes if you can stop around if there are any questions to answer, and any feedback in terms of the session would also be appreciated. Thank you very much for your attendance. I'm going to click on the chat screen now because I finished my presentation and I want to just see what you've been saying, so that will be helpful. And the link for this recording will be available and uploaded, so if you want to share that with anyone, you can certainly do that. And of course, if you know similar businesses who might benefit from this sort of help, then do put them in touch with us, and we'd love to try and help. Yeah, thank you for all the feedback. That's helpful. I'm just flicking through the questions. I can't see any obvious questions. Someone said, is this document available to download? You mean the presentation? I'm assuming that's James. If that's what you're saying, James, I'm sure we can get a copy of the slides to you. That's not a problem. In fact, I think Nowza's already answered that, so thank you for that, Nowza. Great. Okay. Well, if there are no further questions, then again, it just leaves me to say thank you for attending. Thank you for your time, and certainly we'll look forward to seeing you again at the next sessions and helping you get in a better state to write and submit winning bids. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks again. All the best.